Welcome to PBCJ's Morning Coffee Guest. I'm your host, Simone Absalom. This week, we continue our focus on suicide prevention by examining the relationship between mental illness and suicide. Join us as we delve into this taboo issue. We'll have more in a few. Welcome back to Morning Coffee Guest. I'm Simone Absalom. The month of September is observed as Suicide Prevention Month. According to a recently conducted Jamaica Health and Lifestyle Survey, depression is one of the main predisposition factors to suicide. This morning, we'll be speaking with President of the Jamaican Psychological Society, Dr. Kai Morgan, about the relationship between mental illness and suicide. Thanks so much for joining us, Dr. Morgan.
You're welcome.
All right, how do you define the broad spectrum of mental illness?
That's a big question. So I'll answer by talking about anything, any behavior, any state, mood state that really impairs our functioning. So I'm talking about the big categories like mood disorders, which include depression and different types of depression, anxiety disorders, psychotic disorders, which include things like schizophrenia and other issues with reality and the impairment of your reality. And there are many other trauma and stress-related disorders. The DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, is the quote-unquote Bible, if you will, or the International Classification of Diseases. And it's about this thick. So I'm giving you a very broad synopsis of what we're talking about. The most common ones tend to be depression, tend to be anxiety. Those are at the top of the list for the quote-unquote common regular person that's working and parenting and doing all these other regular things. We also do have our psychotic disorders, schizophrenia. Those you will see more in a mental health facility, for example.
Wow. And what are the symptoms of these disorders?
So depression has both physiological and psychological symptoms. So you're gonna have things like you're not able to sleep, or you're sleeping too much, like you're feeling lethargic, appetite changes, you could be eating too much or eating too little. And these all represent changes in the regular ways that these individuals function. And then you have like more psychological symptoms that include the actual mood state. So you have your mood is low. You feel really sad. You feel really low, feel really depressed, right? You have that feeling. You don't want to do anything that you normally do. And then there are things that will come up like thoughts of suicide, feelings of hopelessness, right? So all of these things constitute a clinical, as we would say, depression.
And what about, say, schizophrenia or those other mental illnesses?
Right.
That are
So
common?
Schizophrenia really includes, very importantly, a state of reality that is changed. So there are two main components, which are hallucinations. So your hallucinations, you see things that others don't see. That would be a visual hallucination. You can have auditory hallucinations where you're hearing things that others are not hearing. And so these represent, again, a change in functioning. Those are the main things. And there are a lot of things that come with schizophrenia, with psychosis, but those are the two. A delusion, is the other one. So a delusion is like a fixed false belief. So you think that this person is putting something into your coffee every single morning and trying to do something to you. There may be paranoid kinds of delusions, persecutory kinds of delusions. People are trying to hurt me, trying to harm me, things like that. So there are different types of delusions. So those two characteristics are the main components of schizophrenia.
Are any of these disorders considered risks factors for suicidal tendencies?
Right, so definitely depression. And I didn't mention anxiety in terms of defining that for you, which is also a big one. But anxiety can also be very much part and parcel with suicidal and have suicidal ideation as well. But depression by far and large. So anxiety basically will involve a state of like excessive fear. And there's several types of anxieties that you could have anxieties about anything, and we call that one a more generalized one. You could have anxiety about lizards or specific things, heights, etc., which are more specific phobias. You could have anxiety about socializing with people and dealing with people, and that's a social anxiety disorder, and several of these kinds of issues. So those sometimes, as you can see, have a very close link with depression. So sometimes if you're not handling all of that very well, it can lead to a depression. And depression, one of the symptoms of depression is suicidal thoughts. To feel depressed is something that I think everybody experiences or has experienced, right? So something could happen at work, or you could lose your job, or you could, have a falling out with a friend, or whatever it is, and you feel low, you feel sad, so you feel a little bit depressed. Usually that kind of feeling, it might take you a day, it might take you 2 days, it might take you a couple hours, whatever it is, and you feel a little better, right? When you have what we call a clinical depression, you're feeling that for a longer period of time, so at least 2 weeks straight, you're in this very low mood, which comes with all the other things I mentioned, not wanting to do anything, and it can be longer than that. And that may come back. So that's one episode, as we'd call it. But then it may return next month. It may return in a couple months' time, whatever it is. So that essentially is the difference, and it impairs your functioning. Most of our suicide cases, persons are struggling and have been struggling with depression, right? So I think there were 61 last year, right? So of those, you see a trend. You see that they had been depressed, things were not going well, and so you know that there is usually a mental illness involved with suicide.
So what measures can be employed to prevent suicide amongst persons who have mental disorders?
The support is a really important factor. They need that kind of input. They may appear not to, or they may reject that kind of support. Leave me, I'd like to be by myself, just don't call me, just don't. Or they may withdraw themselves and not be calling you as a friend, and you may be sitting there thinking, oh, how she don't call me, and you just leave it alone. I would encourage you at that point to kind of stay involved, those persons in their lives, the family, the friends, to stay involved with that person at that time. There are a few organizations around that tend to work around mental health. We do have, at JAMPSych ourselves, Jamaican Psychological Society, we do try to make those linkages for individuals. If you email us, check our website at jampsych.com, you'll see a list of our members, and we try to help them to say, okay, can anybody take this on, et cetera, et cetera. So we try to assist in those different ways and trying to build a list of resources so that people can access easily to say, okay, we could go here for this and here for this.
All right, so one word of advice for someone out there who might be watching this and they are considering or they're battling thoughts of suicide. What do you have to say to them? That's the camera right there.
That I think that there is hope. Hopelessness is a huge thing, and in the moment, there is a feeling of absolute hopelessness. I think it's really important that there is actually going to be hope, and give it a chance, give it a try. You never know. You may be able to find that help that you are seeking, that you're wanting, because you're really reaching out and trying to find a lifeline somewhere. And you never know, with persons that are trained and that are able to offer these services, you may just find that lifeline.
All right. All right. Thank you once again, Dr. Morgan, for joining us. When we return, we'll be speaking with someone who has experienced personally what it is like to battle thoughts of suicide. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Morning Coffee Guest. Joining us now as we continue our conversation about suicide prevention is author and mental health advocate Tammy Sansai. Thanks so much for joining us, Tammy.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we'd like for you to share with us your mental health journey. Do you recall when you first started recognizing that there might be something wrong?
Yeah, I think that for me, it's more other persons who pointed me in the direction. I didn't think anything was wrong at first. I noticed that as a child, around as early as 8 or 9, I noticed that I had a lot of mood swings. And I also noticed that sometimes I had very low feelings. Meanwhile, other children would want to play and stuff like that. There were times when I would just shut down and not want to do anything. So that would be the first indicator for me.
Can you recall your first attempt at suicide? What was it like?
Right around the same age, I believe I was 8.5 the first time that I tried to commit suicide. To be clear, I didn't really understand what it was or the gravity of what I was trying to do, but I knew what I felt and I knew how I thought, and I tried to act on that. So that was the first time.
Do you remember it clearly, the incident?
Yes, I heard that there were some berries. They look like cherries. I don't know what they really are called, but I heard that they were poisonous. I felt very down. I felt like maybe I should try to take myself out of the situation, and I decided to eat a whole heap of them. I got very sick. I had to go to the doctor, and I was out of school for a few days.
Just how many attempts have you made to end your life throughout?
Three so far. So there was another one in third form of high school, and then the final one was 2008, right before I left you in 2009. So 2008, the year before I left, that was the last.
And when did you decide it was time to seek help?
Well, that is kind of a tricky situation. I never really felt like something was wrong with me. So it took me quite a while to get to a place of seeking help. I knew that there were a lot of things that I was challenged with in terms of emotions to process. So I would go and get counseling, but I never thought about medication as a solution for me, because I'm looking at myself, just functioning in daily life. I'm doing work, I'm going to school, so I'm thinking, well, I don't need any kind of medication for that. So I would go and get counseling. I think the first time I did that, it was at UA. I believe it was probably the same year. It might have been 2007 or 8. But I had a bad experience with that, where the counselor actually spoke outside of the confidentiality. So that was something that really deterred me from seeking help again for a long time. But counseling is really where I sought help first, and then a couple of years after that, I believe it was 2011, I started going to regular therapy. I stopped again because you know how it goes, financial situation. I couldn't afford it, so I stopped. And then in 2014, I started going back to a regular therapist again.
So when were you diagnosed?
I was actually diagnosed with bipolar 1 in 2015. Prior to that, when I was in third form and I had that suicide attempt, I was diagnosed depressed. But that label never fit for me because I didn't really think that I was down a lot all the time. I noticed the mood swings more than I noticed being down, even though that was prevalent. So I always kind of in the back of my mind was wondering what else is going on. So that's what really happened. In 2015, a friend of mine, she said that she thought it would be good to get like a full psychiatric assessment. And she gave that to me as a birthday gift. So that friend was really like integral in me getting that diagnosis.
What was your initial response to the diagnosis?
I felt very relieved. By the time I got around to going to get that diagnosis, I kind of suspected that it might be bipolar based on, I was doing a lot of research to figure out myself and to see how best to balance my moods and stuff like that. So bipolar kept coming up and I thought it might be that because that made more sense to me than just plain depression. So as I said, my friend supported me in doing that. She gave that to me. And when I got the diagnosis, I felt very relieved. I felt like, okay, this makes more sense to me now. I think I have like a clearer understanding of what is happening and how to manage it because I just wanted to really fix the issue by then.
Speaking of how to understand this, define for us, those of us who might not know, what that diagnosis means.
Well, bipolar disorder is really, as it sounds, is like polar opposites. So you might have like really high moods, really low moods. So for me personally, there was really no middle ground. I'm either way up or way down. And this can happen very suddenly. Sometimes there's a little bit of a transition, but for the most part, you have like these high periods that you call mania, and then you just slump down. And it really is very extreme on both ends.
And how has being diagnosed affected the understanding you have of yourself?
That's kind of a tricky question because I don't necessarily define myself by having bipolar disorder. I think that bipolar disorder is an experience that I have. So, for example, if you are an asthmatic person or somebody with diabetes, you don't go around telling people you're an asthmatic person or I am a diabetic unless it comes up, unless you're having that experience at the time. That's the same way that I relate to having bipolar disorder. So I don't see myself as a bipolar person. I see myself as someone who has had experiences on the bipolar side.
Totally understandable. So it does not define you as a person.
Not at all.
Exactly. And how, though, has it affected your approach to treatment? Because you said that you've had a series of treatments going up, but how has it affected what you're doing now?
Well, I did, as I said, counseling a couple of times. I have been on medication before, not for any sustained period of time. I think the longest period of time I had to be on medication was for 2 years, and then I transitioned out of that into the lifestyle changes. So now what I do is if I need extra support, I'll go and see a therapist. But for the most part, I balance myself with the lifestyle changes and I don't necessarily need any kind of medication. I do a lot of like natural herbal remedies and stuff like that. And just by watching what I eat, staying active, meditating, getting enough rest, things that you would normally do to balance your health in general, those are the things that help you with mental health challenges as well. Though some people are more severe, so they actually need to be on medication, but it's not that severe for me now, so I don't have to do that anymore.
We do hope that others learn from your experiences, especially those that you've shared with us right now today. Stay with us though, we'll have more in this discussion when we get back. Welcome back to a special edition of Morning Coffee Guest. We have been speaking with author and mental health advocate Tammy Sansai, who has been sharing her mental health journey with us. Thanks again for joining us, Tammy. Now, would you encourage others who have similar symptoms to do an evaluation to determine the cause or whether or not they might be experiencing a mental disorder?
Absolutely. I think it can't hurt if you're not sure to just get that clarity. And if you definitely feel as if something is wrong, then it helps to even to treat it, you need to know what you're treating. So the best thing to do is get an evaluation to find out, and that will help you to know if you need medication, if you need just counseling, if you need a combination of both. It's like the right thing to do.
Tell me though about the stigma associated with mental disorder in the Jamaican experience.
Oh God, like it is so thick. It is so thick. Like stigma is really the definition and like the attachment to mental illness for people in Jamaica. You really don't hear of one without the other. And it's really unfortunate because stigma is what really prevents people from getting the help that they need and from reaching out to get the support that they need. So that's why we really need to get to the bottom of the stigma and just kind of clear that up and have people understand that the same way you can have any other illness is the same way that you can have a challenge with your mental health, and it doesn't necessarily make you a specific kind of person. And that has a lot to do with the suicide attempts that we have in the country as well, because people who could go and get help, they don't get it because they're afraid to talk about it. So we really want people to be open about these things. I have experienced stigma all over, in family relationships, in intimate relationships with friends, in the workspace. One incident stands out very much for me in a company that I worked with because I started to put my experiences on a mental health blog, and that is really what kind of catapulted me into this advocacy situation. But I didn't really make that public at work. I was just doing it. And someone at work found out about it, and I walked into a lunchroom discussion about how the mad girl have a blog about being mad and just all kinds of, ignorant things about it. And at the time, I was still kind of struggling and processing what was going on with me. So it was very heavy for me. I wasn't really prepared to deal with that. So I actually just walked off the job and never went back. So it's something that can really affect you in a whole lot of ways.
You've risen above it.
Yes.
And you are now an advocate. Tell me a little bit about what you do.
At the time when I started the blog, nobody was talking about mental illness, and especially not from the perspective of going through it. So it attracted a lot of people. And that is where the opportunities started to come. People started asking me to write things about mental health challenges for them or to go to places and talk. I joined the Jamaica Mental Health Advocacy Network, which I'm now the Director of Communications for. And I also started a support group in 2016 called It's Okay JA, and we do that under Jamhan once a month. It's in Kingston now, and then it's also going to start in Montego Bay and Maypen soon. So the aim is to have support group meetings all across the island so that people who need help can go and speak to counselors, because Jamhan has counselors that volunteer to do that. So really I do a lot of writing and speaking engagements, and just link up with people and kind of open the discussion so they know that it's okay to talk about these experiences and kind of trample the stigma.
Where can people get information about these instances of support group meetings and stuff like that?
You can follow Jamhan online. We are on every social media platform at JamhanJA, that's JAMHAN_JA.
How important is it, in your opinion, is spreading mental health awareness in the Jamaican society?
Extremely, because without the awareness, we won't be able to open the discussion and have people know that nothing is necessarily wrong with you. You're just dealing with a challenge, and you can get help in dealing with the challenge and living your life quite normally.
How important is it to have a support system behind you? You had that one friend who was really adamant, but how important is it to a person who's going through the situation?
Honestly, the difference between having a support system and not having one is life and death. Because for somebody who has nobody, they check out. So having the support system can really define or just make that delineation for somebody to say, well, I have a reason to be here, or I have somebody who is counting on me to be here. Without that, it is much easier to make the decision that your life is worthless and that there's nothing to look forward to. So I would say, absolutely.
Let's talk about your book,
Yes.
because I think it's a part of your advocacy journey. And of course, since you are speaking about support system, it's also something written that you can read and gain experience and information that might help you if you're going through the situation of depression or other symptoms of a mental disorder. The book called Hard Gal for Dead. Musings, poems, and notes to self.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, Hard Gal for Dead, boy, that book is my baby. You know, this book is really, it saved my life. A lot of my experiences on this mental health journey that I've been on, that's what's in the book. It has a whole lot of information generally, but mainly about my mental health challenges. It talks about being on a mental ward. It talks about, you know, the low points, the anxiety, the depression, you know, the mood swings. It really goes into detail with my perspective. And since I have published the book, I find that it has been helping a lot of people. And it really is a good conversation starter to talk about mental illness as well, and any kind of mental health challenge really, or any kind of emotional health challenge. So the musings are really things that I thought and feelings that I had, or like relating direct experiences that I had. That's what's in the first section. And then poems, you know, that has like inspiration, but not as direct as the musings. And then the notes to self now, that is what I wrote when I was at my lowest point. And I didn't have anybody to encourage me, so I had to like write down the things that I wish somebody would tell me and read them back to myself. And that is what helped me to kind of pull myself out of the pits. So that's the part that resonates the most with people, I think.
Such an emotive piece of work. Where can we purchase the book? Where can we get the book to buy?
You can buy it on Amazon. You can buy it on Kindle. It's available at Bookophilia. And they, if you're anywhere on the island, you can order it from them and they will send it to you. You can just walk in, or you can link me directly and get it.
Oh, how can we get to link you?
You can email me, or you can follow me on social media at Tammy Sansai everywhere. Same way how it's spelled on the book.
All right, real quickly before we end, what would you like to say to someone who's going through something similar to what you went through briefly? That's your camera. Speak to your people.
There is hope and there's help. You don't necessarily have to get to the point of wanting to commit suicide or attempting to commit suicide before you get that help. So it's really important that you reach out to somebody, even if you don't, especially if you don't feel like reaching out to anybody. That is the time when you need the help the most, because that's the time when I needed the help the most. So help is out there. You have support groups, you have therapists, even somebody who you work with or go to church with, somebody that you can speak to. Just tell one person. Don't keep it to yourself.
All right. Author of Hard Gal for Dead and mental health advocate Tammy Sansai, thanks so much for coming through and sharing your story with us.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
It was a learning experience. Remember, if you or someone you know is struggling with depression or thoughts of suicide, please reach out to your loved ones, mental health professionals, or call a local support group. You are not alone. This has been PBCJ's Morning Coffee Guest. Thanks very much for watching.